So I'm really kind of a bit disappointed with myself at the moment because, like, when I make a video and do a talk, I know there's a lot of pausing, kind of stuttering sometimes, and can't necessarily think of the best words of vocabulary. And also, what I'm doing is when I'm talking, what I actually say and speak is really inadequate and nowhere near as thorough as what needs to be said. The words are extensive, but this is the problem. I'm not a great speaker. It's all in my mind, it's all in my head, and as I'm going along the whole narrative of information in my mind, only a very small portion of that gets put into the words and vocabulary, and I can't think of the wider extensive vocabulary of words to use to completely thoroughly clarify what needs to be said. It's not that I don't know it, and then I'll think of other things and I'll get diverted or distracted, and then I might say something unprofessional like, the word poo-poo, which I hate that word. I can't stand it. I don't like it. When I listen to the video back, I cringe, right? I mentioned that in a video for West Yorkshire Police, right? John Robbins. Don't know why I put that word in there. I hate that word. I can't stand it, and I don't like it when I listen to my own video back, right? When I say it. And then when I'm talking about certain things, it's like, okay, I was thinking of that subject, and I was thinking of all these things that need to be said, and I didn't say them, right? So it conjures up a whole itinerary of things, like, and I'm like, okay, we're on this subject now, and they're all the things, right, that we're talking about, but I didn't say half of them, but I knew them. I'm just expecting everyone else to know them by simply saying 1, 2, or 3 words when I didn't, right? And I'm getting upset. And then sometimes I might start swearing or whatever and, sound kind of extra casual like now, when it is really an important topic and subject. For example, the Human Rights Act, 1998, it's also enacted into the criminal procedure rules, right? Judges are allowed to decide if legislation is compatible with convention rights. They've been given that power. Normally, justices can't make decisions on parliamentary legislation. Only matters, and the legislation is, matters decidable only in Parliament, right? Now, judges can interpret law, but before the Human Rights Act, they weren't allowed to say that, a law was not legal, effectively. And now they can say, when it's specifically for human convention rights, they're allowed to say that particular acts of law are not compatible with those rights, okay? So they're allowed to make decisions that they previously couldn't do. Well, we didn't have the Human Rights Act before. So when it comes to the police prosecuting MPs for misconduct in public office around, specifically when we're talking about the Human Rights Act, right, nothing else, right? If it's Human Rights Act conventions, like, so with this Kim Leadbeater issue, right, and we're saying, like, Kim Leadbeater, I don't think that her assisted dying bill's legal. I think it's illegal, right? You say, well, can we prosecute her for misconduct in public office? Well, you'd have to be able to go into a court and say what she's doing, the assisted dying bill, isn't compatible with convention right. Therefore, it's unlawful, and she's not acting according to law. Well, usually all the things that MP do in Parliament is privileged, right? But on this occasion, because it's a convention right, and because the criminal procedure rule says that a justice has the power to decide that something is incompatible with convention right, then it is something that is cognizable outside of Parliament, okay? The compatibility of it So if a judge says that, this is not compatible with convention right, so therefore it wasn't compatible with it when they were trying to make the law, right? A judge can decide that. So therefore, it's unlawful. A judge can say this law can't be lawful. It's illegal. So therefore, why did the MPs make it when they had to act according to law in the first place? So because a judge has the power to say this is not compatible with the convention, right? Then clearly, they've made a judgment that what the MP was doing was not lawful, right? It was against the convention right. And then obviously, so they didn't act according to law. And if they didn't act according to law, they weren't following their oath, right? And they were in misconduct in public office, could be treasonous. So specifically for convention rights, there is a very important exemption, right? Now, there are some other important things to say. Some people have been bringing judicial reviews against the Home Office, Home Secretary, and people like that, right? Like for housing these immigrants and things like that. You got to be careful with judicial reviews against government departments and officers, particularly ministers, right? Because in the Human Rights Act, public authorities, okay, this is the thing with not Suella Braverman, Shabana Mahmood, right? Shabana Mahmood was taken with a judicial review to the High Court, and 3 justices said that, she shouldn't have done the prescribed groups. But doing that prescribed groups is a specific thing. It's putting something into a legal effect of law, right? It's legislative because you're applying something to make it lawful or unlawful in law. It says that that's not an act of a public authority, it's an act of Parliament, right? And it's not to do with convention rights. It's a specific thing that a power that she's been given to do herself in another act, right? Which says that person in that position can make that decision, right? That's not a human rights issue thing, right? Because it's not a human rights article. It's a power to make something in a legislative effect, right? So she shouldn't have been prosecuted by the High Court for that. That is privileged. But for general functions, right, of those departments, when it's not something that is to put something into a legal effect of law, then they can do the judicial reviews for the government departments, right? But for this convention right thing, it's a thing of its own. Convention rights, when it comes to criminal procedure rules and whether it's against the convention all right or not, is something that judges are allowed to decide on, right? So when it comes into MPs committing offences and crimes, judges can determine that, right? Now, when it comes to arresting MPs, I forgot to say in the other videos, and this really annoyed me when I listened back to myself, right? Look, I don't think that Mike Amesbury should have been arrested, right? I think that Mike Amesbury should have been investigated, but not arrested. Mike Amesbury, it was summary, right? I'm pretty sure his offence was summary. He should have been prosecuted at the end of the session, right? That's my opinion. If he'd have been indicted, he could have been prosecuted during Parliament, but not arrested or imprisoned until the end of the session. And then you still have got this recall process where the public can recall him with a recall petition. If they don't, then he stays as an MP. They're not supposed to be put in prison, right, while they're serving a job and a role. And I forgot to mention that about Kim Leadbeater. In fact, I did mention, reading her rights, right? But you can read her rights when you're questioning her and things like that for a statement, but you don't necessarily have to put handcuffs on her, put her in custody, right? She can voluntarily go for questioning. It's different, actually. You can turn up at a police station and go in there and answer questions and then come back out again. But if they charge you, they make you take your shoes off, which is quite derogatory. And then, then they put you on bail and release you, and you've sort of been done then. But you still walk out of the building the same as if you walk into the building. But you had to take the factor that they make you take your shoes off and then say, I have to bail you and all this. It's then, I don't believe they can. The MPs don't need bail because they can't be put in custody, right, until the end of the session. And on misdemeanors, with a misdemeanor, you can't even prosecute them or bring the proceedings until the end of session. That's what the Parliamentary Privileges Acts are meant to be there for, right? So for Kim Leadbeater, I want I want the police to take action, but I don't necessarily believe that she should be put under arrest or put handcuffs on her, right? Because she's an MP. But I still think that it's a indictable offence, right? It's not a summary, that's for sure. And therefore they can initiate and bring proceedings during Parliament session time, right? And if she got prosecuted, then they'd have to write to the Speaker, the court, and then she could have a recall petition to remove her, right? Because you can't remove her without a recall petition anyway, according to that act. So there are a few things I wanted to clear up that I didn't mention. I mean, there's all kinds of things that, you know, I'm really disappointed with my own video talks at the moment, because it's all there, all the information's there, but there's so much information, you know, and because I don't, at the moment, I just have not got the vocabulary at the moment. I used to have it, I've had it, you know, a lot of my life, you know, I've had a really good vocabulary, and now I just don't, and it's really upsetting and disappointing, particularly also when, if I'm talking about a subject, there's so many things in and around the subject that, you know, where to start is like a jigsaw puzzle, you know. I mean, where do I want to start putting the pieces in? And then if I put them on towards the left, I go off to the left side on the subject, or another side, and then I have to come back on the centre to go in the direction of the main narrative. So, I mean, how much do you want to fill it in? And then you end up not really filling it in at all, because you're just doing a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there and a little bit there. And it's not like, you know, when an artist does a perfect pencil drawing of a portrait with a scene, you've got all these details, right, in a pencil drawing, like infinite details. I mean, I could never draw a picture like that. But explaining these subjects, you need to like sketch out the whole thing in great detail, but, you know, not just the portrait of the person and the background and then all the different shadings here and there and the whole thing. And that's what I'm trying to do with these subjects. But it just ends up, when I listen back to it, being a little bit of a scribble here and a bit of a scribble there and a bit of a scribble there. But I could see the scene, I could see the law, the whole model, the whole legislative, the entire, you know, skeleton argument model, and all the details, like whole branches of the tree with the leaves on and everything. But my mouth, when I talk, it's just not, it's like the hand with the pencil is just not up to the job. This is why police are trained to speak a certain way, so they're clear and clarified when they talk. You know, very few people talk like that, right? It's to make sure that words aren't misinterpreted or interpreted the wrong way. You know, what did you mean when you said this or that, etc., etc., and to try and be as thorough as possible, right? I'm not a police officer. I'm not trained to do that. You know, but that's not to say that I can't understand the law as much as a police officer or not. It's just that they convey themselves differently, right? And this is the whole thing about going to university and spending years in university and doing a dissertation, and you learn the whole vocabulary of the university and so forth and so forth, and everything sounds really, you know, professional and academic, not like someone in a local area, you know, with a working class accent, just kind of umming and ahhing, and there's a lot of, you know, ifs and buts in there, and etc., etc. So it's kind of really upsetting and disappointing to listen to myself back. But regardless of that, I think that I still think that, you know, there's always the main insight, right? There's always like a main primary insight of looking at something which other people seem to have missed or, you know, disregarded or not understood properly, or just like they're lying about it, right? And it's those main points that are important. Just like they're quite easy to explain, right? You say, it's almost kind of like sometimes if you go into a museum and there's a peculiar object and people might not quite know what that object's for, but if you tell them, and then they just go, all right, yeah, I see, like, it's a strange implement, and then you go, you might, use it for planting seeds or something, you hold it like this, and then they can see that, and then they can understand that, the shape of it is for this or that. So it's just sometimes a matter of, sometimes what I'm trying to say on that is sometimes a simple explanation is enough to something that might otherwise seem complicated, right? And you say, well, like with the MP's privileges, okay? Because if you say to someone, oh, well, the privilege of Parliament for MPs, not when they're doing parliamentary work in their own private lives, when MPs are out and about in their own private life, they're privileged. If they get prosecuted, there's supposed to be a postponement of the proceedings, right? Because they're an MP, right? If you say that, you say, like, they're immune from criminal charges. You say, well, there's meant to be a postponement for criminal charges because they've got a job to do they're elected for, right? And then, there's an appropriate time to bring those charges. And if they're found guilty, then, the public have got to remove them, with one of these recall petitions now. But they're not meant to be put in prison while they've got the privilege of protection. And you say, well, so they can be prosecuted. It's meant to be a postponement depending on how serious it is or not, whether it's summary or a felony. But the thing is, they abolished felonies, right? That's another ironic thing. They abolished the felony and said that anything that previously was a felony or described as it, it's only misdemeanor. Well, MPs can only be prosecuted for felony or treason, right? During Parliament time. It could only be started in Parliament time for felony or treason, right? If they're not even felony anymore, so it's only treason. So, but then after the 1688 Bill of Rights said that, that felony or treason is meant to be in their own private life, right? When it's work for Parliament, it's only meant to be tried or prosecuted in Parliament. But then you say, so why am I wanting to get Kim Leadbeater prosecuted? Well, because judges can decide that a judge has the power to say that when it comes to convention rights, this is a special thing, a unique thing since 1998, right? Those judges can decide that legislation is not compatible with it, right? They've got the power to do that. So when these MPs are making these laws, if they're against the convention rights, and the police have got to uphold the convention rights, the police can act and a judge can act because it says that they can in the criminal procedure rules, right? So that's something for that. And obviously, if a police officer can act and a judge can say this is not compatible with convention, right, then he's not compatible with it. And but if the MP, the MP should have known that, and they acted, against the law when they knew that it wasn't. They should have known it wasn't compatible. So they clearly were either lying. So there's some sort of misconduct in public office going on, or perjury of their oath, or possibly treason, right? So a judge can actually decide that. Now, whether you want to say, if it's only decidable by Parliament, but Parliament cannot violate the right to life, then you say, well, can Parliament decide, whether or not they can repeal that act, the Human Rights Act, to repeal, and then they can do the right to life, the assisted dying bill, around it, because if they repeal it, then they can do it, but they haven't repealed it. So currently they can't do it, but regardless, what I'm trying to say is that for convention rights, it's completely different because you've got all these criminal procedural things going on. There are some strange things going on with it in relation to privileges. It's kind of, but they facilitated for it in there with the acts of public authorities, which are different to acts of Parliament or pursuing public business or private business to Parliament. Public bills or private bills is different, But anyone can ask me any question they want about the privilege now, and I can pretty much provide the answer or the explanation according to what acts there are, because you've got these Parliamentary Privileges Acts, and then you've got the law of Parliament itself, and you've got the constitutional law, depending on which acts that you want to mention or raise, So, any of it can be explained. You just got to ask the question, with Lord Hanningfield, he should have been prosecuted. Why do I keep saying that? Really, he should not have been prosecuted. Really, he should have had civil proceedings brought against him first, and got it resolved that way, rather than coming in from the criminal side of it. And I don't know why they did that. And there was all that hoo-ha about Lord's privileges. That was before 2013. That actually happened before I even, got interested in all this. And I don't know why the newspapers were doing all that thing about privilege, and they wanted to prosecute them criminally, but they didn't have to. They didn't need to. They could just take them to the High Court and say, you owe this money, and we'll prove it, right? And then it could have been done with. And then once they proved that, then they could say, right, we want Parliament to, punish them, which they had the power to do. So it was all the newspapers, really. It was the newspapers, and that's the power the newspapers have got. They've got powers of private investigators. They've got powers to put everything in the press and put pressure on the police to act in the CPS. Unfortunately, there are a lot of things now that really need to be done that the newspapers aren't interested in, and really won't talk about, like them breaking the tax law for adverts for petitions, and all this election cheating with the copyrighting of the election material, which is piracy. It's not fair use, right? It's actually people are publishing it, making it available to the public at large, which is not fair use. It's to influence elections. That's illegal. The newspapers aren't going to do anything about that. We can't get the police to do anything about it. And then there's all this assisted suicide, the acts against the right to life. There's so many things now, and there's so many things that the general public need to be educated on and told. But it's all, the MPs aren't going to help us in that, because they're the ones who are doing it wrong. And you can't get heard now, because it's all about how many fans and followers you've got, and people are generalising about all the things that are happening and just recirculating it, and everyone's just interested in their own thing. Rupert Lowe is focused on these grooming gangs, right? And he's not interested in anything else, really. He's not going to be interested in political party, election copyright, and breaking the rules, I don't think, because I think that, it's not going to help his party, and most of the parties have been complicit in it all. So I don't know if anything is going to happen with it. And they've all been voting on the assisted suicide act, so I don't know if anything they're going to do about that. It's impossible to get anyone to listen now, and you have to want to be a celebrity now, and be some sort of minor celebrity or well known, and you got to try to and want to have loads and loads of fans and followers, or you're not going to get any messages out there. It can't be done. If you just want, you can't actually have a normal life anymore. If you want to have a normal life and just get on as normal, I think normal life's gone now. I think what we consider a normal life is gone, but it's all against the right to privacy. All the social media stuff, consent to may accept from the Americans, is completely against EU law. It's completely and totally illegal in Europe. It's against the right to privacy, and no one's actually bringing the right cases or doing anything about it. That's another big thing, and the government are championing these platforms, and even the channels that were interested in protesting and rights and corrupt government, they're not interested. It's literally like being behind a glass screen, banging with your fist on the glass, because, and they're having the same guests on who pretty much talk about the same thing every time they're on there, and they keep going back on again, and they're, even Andrew Bridgen, it's kind of, listening to Andrew Bridgen is painful, because, he's sort of on the right side, doing the right thing, and there are all these serious important issues, but it's kind of like there's so much more to be said, and there's so many more things to be focused on, and there's so many things that people could do to help get the things that they. I mean, Andrew Bridgen's not going to talk about, election copyright fraud and law at all. And he's not going to talk around the Human Rights Act and, whether assisted dying is legal or not. Trying to get him to talk about it. I complained to Ben Habib about privileges, and I managed to get him to, I started to talk about privileges a little bit, and people started to talk about it in some videos, but it's very difficult to get them onto the subject and raise awareness of it generally. Really, really hard. And then there's all these other incidents going off, like in the news, and then everyone's concentrating on this one and the same thing. It's kind of like the main narrative gets hijacked by 1, 2, or 3 main stories, primarily grooming gangs at the moment and things like that, and you can't get nothing else heard. It's like they're kind of like these amorphous blobs that blot out the whole social media and conversation of everything. And maybe the whole country doesn't want to know that they're all breaking the law, copying all the election material, right? Because that's the last thing they want to know. They really couldn't give a fuck, right? Like Hartley Hare from, the 20 mile an hour Wales groups, right? They don't care, right? Because they're having a go at Starmer or whatever. But, they've got to separate their, public business from their election material. And at the moment, it's crossing over into election material too much, and it's having a really adverse effect. Something needs to be done about it. And, Parliament having all their official communication with their pages. What they're doing is that they're fighting a revolution through ignorance, and they're completely breaking the law. They want everyone to listen to them. They want all MPs, want the whole country to listen to them, every single one of them. And they can tell us all their policies. They want to have a one-way surgery with the whole nation. Every MP, right, wants a one-way surgery with all of England, but we can't have a surgery with them unless we're in their electorate. And then you look at which MP you get, because some MPs are a lot better than others, but some of them are good in some subjects and not other subjects, which is really unfair. It's very unfair when these MPs are wanting to go on TV and they're not ministers, but they want the whole nation to listen to them, and they want to they get their message across to us and their opinion across to us and their advice surgery across to us, but then we can't I can't talk to you, or I can't engage with you. But then they're on Big Brother Watch, or there are all these media channels are having them on. It's really unfair. And this is the time when we need to speak to them, and we need them to take our casework on and act. But they don't want to take our casework on because they're already on with the things that they want to concentrate on and do. Like the Tories have, written out their new manifesto or whatever. It's really unfair. It's like, like when they put the glass up, right? Supposedly in the House of Commons, so, they could keep everyone quiet, and people's chanting wouldn't interrupt proceedings. It's like that. What they've done is, they've silenced us all. They said, none of you can talk or do casework with anyone, right? Unless it's your own MP, and then you're lucky if you can get to see your own MP anyway, right? And but we can talk to you. It's like Parliament. Well, they've made it like the whole country is now kind of a little bit like the House of Commons, right? You know, but MPs are only meant to speak and be heard in Commons, and then it be officially published, right? And that's why they get elected. There's no point in them being elected if they're just not heard in Parliament. They're now wanting the whole country to hear them on their social media and all these, but they're going for media interviews all over the country with all these people who are getting in contact with them, and there are a lot of people who, and they're just peddling. A lot of the programmes haven't got really very good questions to raise or points to throw in, and the MPs are just peddling the business when they're on there, right? It's not like persons who have got some very good questions to put to them, some very good points to put to them, to hold them account to, and to challenge them, criticise them, and question what they're doing, right? Which is what the news are going to be doing. But, you know, BBC and ITV all got their own agenda, right? You know, if these MPs were put in front of people who could really give them good scrutiny and questions, then it would be different. And that's what has been blocked out and stopped and obstructed. And that's why we've got problems like lots of law-breaking, crimes, procedure not being followed properly. This e-petitions, just absolutely scandalous. It's the most treasonous, scandalous thing. In fact, he was already, you know, they were already saying in the 1970s, like 1972, 1973, they were saying, oh, you know, paper petitions is a lot of rubbish. Like, you know, it's pointless. What's the point in it? You know, excuse me, this is like a really serious, important judicial process. Like the level of an affidavit that you swear an oath and prayer to, with very serious allegations at government level, and also trying to get laws made and passed. How can it, you know, be a waste of time? It's a waste of time because they made it into a waste of time. And then we've got all, you know, the manual procedure in the public business and privileges and all these processes. They really wanted to get rid of that out of the chamber and put us on this online e-petitions thing that we don't seem to even have a right to submit or raise anything. And these clerks and staff are making decisions who aren't even judicial persons. They're not even sworn in. You know, clerks have never, ever had judicial authority to write their name on a petition, right, and endorse it. They were only consulted by MPs, right, to take advice, and the MP is the judicial power to endorse it, right, and they can choose to endorse it, pretty house like Judge Strickland did. And I don't know what the hell I don't know what Gareth Price is on, but he's not on something called Truth, right? And same with this Jersey state government as well. I don't know what happened to the clerks. It's clear that, you know, it's the generation of Eve Sampson for sure. When Eve Sampson came into government, you know, in the late 80s, she was still, I don't know if she's still there now, but that's just gone massively downhill. And the whole integrity of Parliament has completely gone from procedure. You know, it definitely... It's not like it was, you know, in Baron Denman days, but, you know, Parliament had just burned down, hadn't it? You know, when they did the Parliamentary Papers Act, it was rebuilding it. So, you know, the whole place had burned down, you know? So, I mean, you can't have much more of a knockback than that, you know, when the whole place was on fire. So,